Hello, beautiful souls. I'm your host, Nicole, and welcome to the Intuition Age. My intention for this podcast is to cultivate a sacred space where we can collectively evolve into higher states of conscious and self-awareness. I believe that the sustenance and purpose of our being is already located within the depths of our souls. We just have to rediscover and realign with it. It's time to go inward to find all the answers, clarity, and knowledge we seek. So let's journey within. We all want to thrive. We are all capable of thriving, to live lives of greatness, success, happiness, peace, stability, fulfillment, and passion. To wake up each day feeling aligned and inspired by our realities. When we thrive, we prosper and flourish. We gain an understanding of our needs as integrative beings. We prioritize whole self expansion through balance and interconnection. When we shift into this frequency of thriving, we are no longer limited by a survival mindset. We recognize that life is abundant and filled with infinite possibilities. As a collective, we have been conditioned to exist in survival mode, to be restricted by societal constructs, to be influenced by conformity instead of pursuing our own aligned purposes. How do we quantum leap into a life of expansion and fulfillment? How do we create new paradigms of thriving in our personal and collective realities? Here to share her wisdom on this topic is the very special Sarah Derisio. Sarah is a divine connection, literally brought into my life by a universal force. A completely synchronistic essence united us together. She has really elevated my life with her support, compassion, and knowledge. Her presence has shown me the grand power in soulful connection. I am beyond excited to have Sarah join me on this episode of the Intuition Age. She is a certified life coach, psychology and education master student, and just an overall brilliant being. Her purpose and passion is to empower others to create effective and sustainable transformation in their realities so that they can thrive. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the Intuition Age. How are you?
Hey, Nicole, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So why don't you start just by telling us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Sarah. I am a personal coach, personal development coach, as well as a student at Columbia University studying psychology and education and spirituality. But my main sort of focus is in positive psychology, especially working with emerging adults, young adults, on this concept of thriving and moving these populations towards this state and process of thriving.
So what is this concept of thriving that you discuss?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. This word, the word thriving, is something that really resonated with me when I came across the term positive psychology, which is a new field in psychology, about a year ago. And it's such an interesting word because it's really hard to define. But I like to think of it as really, to be honest, a feeling. Like this feeling of just sort of being in a place of control, peace, a lot of positive emotion. There's a lot of sort of frameworks and theories and research into the concept of thriving, but for me, very much it's a process and a feeling that just you kind of you feel like this is it, this is life. I'm living it, and I'm here, and I'm so present with it.
So, positive psychology, was that something that just kind of stumbled into your life, or was it something you were looking at just like general psychology and then you found positive psychology? How exactly did you become aware?
Yeah. So my first career was actually in sort of the media and business world. And I decided through a series of events that I really wanted to be working more closely with people. I wanted to be working more with them. I really wanted to be helping them in a way that felt much more intentional, purposeful, fulfilling. And so during sort of that career time, I was looking at sort of the psychology space and coaching space, and I ended up taking. I don't have a psychology background. Like I didn't have a psychology background before going into this master's program. So I ended up taking a like first year intro to psych course, and I opened up the textbook the first day, and it kind of gives you a timeline of the psychology field. And the last sort of milestone was positive psychology. Founder, Dr. Martin Seligman, and a short description of positive psychology, which is basically the science of optimal human functioning, or colloquially known as the science of happiness. And it just hit me that that's it. Like that's what I felt was missing. That's what I wanted to learn more about. I really wanted to sort of focus on this place that is, understanding the psychology of human strengths and understanding, redefining what normal mental health is, that kind of thing.
And did you find when you started learning more about positive psychology that you were already integrating, like unknowingly or subconsciously, interventions of positive psychology into your life, or was it all new to you?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. You know what? It felt like I'd been collecting puzzle pieces to a puzzle that I didn't even know I was building. And that final sort of positive psychology definition was the final piece that gave me the full picture. And so one of the things that I look back on and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's one of the starting places. One of my first full-time jobs, my boss evaluated me from this strengths-based perspective, and she used the Gallup Strengths Finders to like write my first day. It was like, come in, take this test. We're going to know your strengths. And that was so new to me at that time. I think I was like, oh gosh, maybe 20, 21. And it just changed everything. Like it felt like, oh, I can do this. Like I can be an employee who operates from this strength-based perspective. Like until that point, I think I'm, perfectionist, so focused on trying to be just perfect with everything, which meant hyper focusing on sort of weaknesses and deficits. So that was a huge one that like I ended up like stealing the book and I use it with my clients now as one of the tools I use. So that was definitely one of the pieces that I'd already sort of integrated. I used it with in my student leadership positions. I used it with those students, and it makes such a difference to look at people from this strength-based point of view.
And were the strengths that, I guess, the strength results that you got on the test, were they ones that you already consciously knew within yourself, or were some kind of new to you?
Some of them are definitely new. The one that comes to mind is developing people.
Oh,
Which, yeah, right. Like I'm in coaching now.
yeah.
It's, that's kind of weird that would be new to me. But at the time, it was really something I hadn't thought of. And I hadn't thought of, I think, so explicitly. And that actually stuck with me. And was one of the things that when I was thinking about my sort of career in media and thinking about how I was going to be able to integrate my strengths into this potential career, I struggled to find a place for that strength. I really, really struggled with it. And that was one of the things actually that kind of guided me towards the coaching, more intimate sort of service, one-on-one service-based space so that I could really use this strength.
To help, yeah, develop
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
For
basically.
sure.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because I feel like a lot of people would see these strengths and be like, okay, it's just a random test generator. Like they just threw these random strengths at me. But the fact that that really stuck out to you and you're like, okay, how come I'm not integrating one of my main strengths into my career, or even into my daily life? Yeah, it's so pivotal to realize that all these strengths that we have that we're not consciously aware of yet could have such an influence in our development and our personal growth, but also the growth of other people as well. So that's just
Yes.
so interesting that that's the one that stuck out and then led you to literally where you are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's one of the ones that I kind of lean on quite heavily. Um, and it's one of those things where I mean, I love what you said about like, it's a test. It's like,
Mhm.
you're not, when you're taking these tests, you're not really working with someone. It's going to spit
Mhm.
out some answers. So I really, really encourage people, like, I think it's a great tool. And it's one of those things where you take what resonates with you.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things that just, might give you sort of an aha moment like that did for me. Or it might say, you know what, this doesn't feel quite right. Um, and there's like a few other ones. The via character strengths is another great one for more holistic virtues. And that one really, what they do is they call them signature strengths. And those are kind of like your, I mean, it could be your top 5, but really it's the ones that when you use them, you're like, I feel like myself.
Mhm.
Like this is me right now. And it just, you kind of feel in flow when you're using it. You feel really just strong. And so that those kind of questions, and you ask those to yourself to really see, okay, is this a strength that resonates with me? And that's something I'll do with my clients all the time. Like whenever I give these, it's like, take this and let's talk about it.
Mm.
And so I think it's really important to have that dialogue when you're using these tools to make sure that, you take what you need from it.
And you take what you need from it right now. Like we're ever evolving to what may not apply to you right now, may apply in the future, or maybe applied to you in the past. So it really is just understanding where you are in the present moment and understanding where you want to be as well. And just
Yeah.
taking what aspects and characteristics of yourself resonate with, who you are, what your what frequencies you're emitting in this moment, and also which ones you want to be
This is
radiating in the future.
This is such a great point. I've had a few clients who have looked at their strengths and they've kind of, that we're kind of drawn to the negative more so, that negativity bias goes straight to the bottom. But some really interesting things come out of that. I had one client who said, gosh, this strength is just like, it's my weakest strength. But I see it as a top strength in this person that I really admire. And throughout our time together in our coaching engagement, she really worked on that strength. And it was amazing to see her develop that because she'd intentionally, saw it as something that was naturally sort of weaker in her and, wanted to develop that. So that's such a great point that it's so evolving and it's so fluid.
So I want to go back to this concept of thriving. How exactly does it correlate to positive psychology?
Yeah. So thriving is definitely like one of the main, I would say, concepts in positive psychology. Dr. Martin Seligman, there's a bunch of different sort of frameworks when you think about happiness or well-being or flourishing. But Martin Seligman has one called as the Perma Model. And basically it stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. And he saw these 5 sort of categories, these 5 areas as the sort of ingredients for true flourishing. And you can see that it really expands, like there's breadth there. And it's really the mixture of these things, the balance of them that I would say helps to create the process and the feeling of flourishing.
So interesting. When I was doing my coaching certificate, the first exercise we were given was this wellness wheel. And I don't know if this is something you utilize in your practice as well, but basically it's this blank wellness wheel with like different components. There's usually like 6 or 8, and we write down different areas of well-being. So our social well-being, financial, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, even like you could put family in, you could put just like personal development in, just different areas of well-being that resonate most with you. And it's true because we're not just like a physical being, or we're not just like a social being or a mental being. We're this whole interconnected, multifaceted being who needs each aspect of ourselves to thrive. So
Yeah.
when like the cool thing about this wellness wheel, you kind of just like color in, it's like 1 to 10, it's like measured 1 to 10, and you color in like how you're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and so on. And you look at what areas in your life where maybe you're not thriving, maybe you're not well right now. And then I usually do it monthly. Like I still do this exercise. It's been like 2.5 years, but I do it like monthly now. Every like new moon, I'll do it. And just to see what areas that I don't feel well in? Like, what areas next month should I focus my attention more to? Like right now, I did it for January, and like my social health was not
Mm.
doing well.
Oh, yes,
And
the
I know a
pandemic.
lot of people, a lot of people are feeling the same way, but I was like, okay, I need to meet with my friends, even if it's through Zoom, just get that social element
Mhm.
increased and get my social well-being increased as well. So just, the idea of that perma model and just realizing that we as humans are so interconnected and so integrative and carry all these different components that aid
Mhm.
in our optimal well-being. It's just,
Yes.
it's such a simple understanding, but it's one that I feel like many of us disregard.
Yeah, I actually, I don't know if you saw, I looked behind me because I used to have that something very similar, if not exactly
Yeah.
that, on my like above my bed. And it was little circles that I'd like cut out and had all these different like life buckets. And I would check in and kind of just, quantify how I felt that I was doing in that
Mhm.
area. And I did do this exercise with a client recently, actually, and it was so interesting because it's so, again, sort of like it's a constant balance. Like it's never going to be like, oh, I've got like the perfect social thriving here, or the perfect, my spirituality is like it's just you're constantly balancing these buckets, and rebalancing them in your context to make sure that you've really, it's again, it's another tool, I guess, to really evaluate kind of if you're feeling off balance. It's a great way to say, okay, do I need to fill up this bucket a little bit more, or maybe spend less time on this bucket? And also, I think it really gives some validity to areas that we, thinking about. My main demographic is sort of that emerging adult, young adult area, whereas we're thinking about who we are, all the potential that's out there, and a big focus tends to be on like work and career development. And we, us, or, I know I do, and a lot of my
I'm
clients,
guilty. Yeah.
yeah, so much value to ourselves based on how that career bucket is doing or that financial bucket is doing. So a wheel like that really, I feel like, kind of shines a light on and gives value and permission to value these other areas, um, to at least more equal degree,
Mhm.
or more degree.
The financial aspect is so important to realize as well. First of all, like, again, we're all interconnected, but I was finding like right after university that my financial well-being was very low. Obviously, I had to pay off a student loan. I didn't have a full-time job yet. There's like many components to it. But I was realizing that when my financial well-being was low, because I attributed basically all of my personal power to my career and to my finances, that every other aspect of my well-being was suffering as well because my financial well-being was so low. So I
Yeah.
found like physical health, like I was working out, eating, but like not quite eating right, or like
Yeah.
stress eating sometimes, or not eating because I was stressed about finances, or like mental well being. It really just diminished how I felt about myself mentally, spiritually, emotionally as well. So, where are you attributing all your personal power? Is it to finances, your financial well being? Is it to even physical health, like mental,
Yeah.
spiritual? Realize where you have like addictive tendencies as well, and just try to create that balance again. Because, many of us, especially millennials, and just like, I feel like even Gen Zs, like, we
Yeah.
attribute all, like, almost all of our personal power just to finances and career. And that's
Yeah.
not the main source of well being.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, we kind of live in that cultural soup. That's sort of, I mean, it takes a lot of work, I think, and courage to sort of assert these other areas, and to use your words, assign your power to other areas of your life. Um, and I mean, that's a huge thing I'm constantly working on, with my clients. Confidence, how our confidence derives from how we feel about the financial area. I know career, like my decision to sort of dive into the psychology, spirituality, well-being area. I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to kind of go on that straighter business route, which was, there was like a grieving process there. And I had to kind of reorient my identity around some of these other areas and find value in that, and step into the power of that, in a way that I hadn't really had to do before, but I was suffering as a result. So it had to be done.
No, I completely agree. It's easier to say, like, step into your spirituality, your mental health, your physical health. But with all of that, even like financial, there's so many conditionings and like limiting
Mhm.
beliefs that we need to first address and acknowledge before we could actually find that balance within ourselves. Like, I know
Mhm.
financially, I was carrying all these like limiting beliefs from like generations. It was like intergenerational
Mm.
conditionings
Yes.
passed to me. And I'm like, okay, there's obviously like the grieving process because we were both in the same program.
Yeah.
We understand there is a grieving process of doing a 4 or 5 year degree and then realizing that that's not actually in alignment with your personal power, with your soul, with your purpose. It's in alignment with whatever conditionings you're carrying with you. Like, my
Yes.
first job was actually in the financial district. And
Wow.
yeah, and at
Huge
a
difference.
moment, yeah, when I was like 18 years old, I'm like, this is so secure. I'm getting, I think minimum wage was like $10 at the time. I was getting like double that. And I was 18
Wow.
years old. And I'm like, this is so secure. Imagine like I'm making $20 at 18 years old. Imagine what I could be making when I'm like 21 and graduated and working in the financial district because I have this connection already.
It's alluring. It's
Yeah. And like I feel like we often, many of us, especially when we're on that like soul journey as well and trying to find our purpose, we kind of, there's definitely like contradictions between our beliefs, what has been like bestowed on us by society or parents or friends, and then what feels right intuitively and innately to us. And there's
yes.
that contradiction that you have to overcome as well. And it's not an easy process.
No, and it's also, I mean, to a degree, it's a lifelong process. But that's a huge, like, gosh, I feel like we can't over exaggerate the power of, and like the necessity. I mean,
Mhm.
financial well-being is also a part of our well-being, and it's a part of our thriving. And I mean, I think the research shows that there's a certain level of financial means that
Mhm.
once you get to this level, like your happiness will improve. So it's
Mhm.
important, it's necessary. But after that point, that's when all
It's
these other things,
access, yeah.
yeah, all these other things start to play a role, like your relationships, your
Mhm.
spirituality, your going back to the Perma model, that sense of achievement. I find that that's actually huge as well in this sort of millennial Gen Z population. I know for me, speaking from personal experience, it's huge when we don't feel like we're achieving. And I think
Unless
it's
we reach
especially hard,
especially financial milestones,
right? And
yeah.
and that's when we kind of need to start, or it's helpful to look at those goals and be like, okay, is there another, like, um, what's one way I can reframe this
Mhm.
to, and it's kind of amazing when when we can have that perspective shift, what will happen. Like you'll really feel that need being met. Even if it's
Mhm.
something as simple as like assigning, okay, making my bed is an achievement.
Mhm.
Like that's something I can succeed with. Um, it's really cool how powerful that can be.
I completely agree, and I feel like during this time of pandemic, like, we are in basically a year of lockdown, give or take here in Toronto or in the GTA, and it's really those little things I've been noticing, making my bed especially, because there are some days where I wake up and I'm like, "I'm really not feeling like it." Like, I'm really not feeling, like, mentally, emotionally, spiritually well to take care of my room or even take care of myself.
Mhm.
And it really is, yeah, those little things that you need to start giving gratitude for because they honestly, first of all, like from an energy perspective, they raise your frequency
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
vibrating at a higher frequency attracts such amazing opportunities and experiences and people into your life. It's everything's just elevated. But at
Mhm.
the same time, they just, I don't know, create this space almost where I don't know how to phrase this. I'm trying to think. I'm having like COVID brain right now. But no, I feel I was gonna say they create a space to thrive, but yeah, I guess that could be a
Yeah.
fun transition.
It's one of my favorite quotes that I was introduced to last year is, and I'm going to butcher this, but basically this idea of like true freedom and happiness, it requires daily maintenance, and it's
Mhm.
in the daily, like, it's in the daily maintenance of things like making your bed, or um, I don't know, like basic hygiene things like
Mhm.
brushing your teeth, which sounds so, simple and almost nonsensical to a degree, but um, really it's those things that like are continual, that life is made up of. Um, and really kind of that lay a foundation for that. I feel like that power and to really kind of hit these higher levels, or not hit these higher levels, but integrate these other areas that for thriving.
I'm just laughing because I honestly I make like little checklists for myself every day of like what tasks I want to get done. They're not extensive or anything, but like I have so much hair. I'm Italian and Portuguese. Like I have so much hair on my head. Basically, my showers take like an hour minimum.
This is very relatable. I am also Italian.
So I put washing my hair on like my checklist twice a week because it's a whole process and I feel accomplished and I feel happy each time I get through, especially now, like I need to cut it so badly, but get through washing my hair.
Yes.
And again, it's something like basic hygiene. Like, yeah, we should all be doing it, but especially from like a psychological standpoint, when you're feeling mentally, emotionally, psychologically unwell, basic hygiene, like you disregard it. It isn't a necessity at that moment.
It becomes heavier, like the weight of doing things like that. Just it's hard. Like it feels a lot heavier than it might feel otherwise. And I think especially during the pandemic, again, just speaking from personal experience, I know that I've struggled with periods where it's like, gosh, do I really have to put on pants today? And that's actually been one of my sort of, goals for this year was to just have a little bit more of that self-discipline to put that care in, to kind of, say, yeah, Sarah, you're worth this. You're worth making your hair a little bit nicer today, or getting that, like indulging in that nice shower. Which it really is that's another thing, forms of self-care. Sometimes the things we don't want to do are just those things that we kind of need to do, especially thinking about thriving, those baseline rocks for that.
Okay, so I have to ask the question, how do we thrive in a world that's going through collective chaos right now, both individually, but also collectively? Like we're in lockdown, like why should we care about our basic self-care needs? Like no one's seen us if we're not wearing pants every day. So it's like, why is that still important to our life and to us wanting to thrive?
Yeah, well, I think just on the basis of our conversation, it's important because so sort of from and this is such an important thing to talk about too, individual to collective thriving. And I mean, it's important to do because that is kind of the bedrock. It's really, for example, it's really hard to, I don't know, like create a podcast. This is an achievement that you're doing right here. It's really hard to do that if you're not kind of showing up like that person who is doing that. You kind of have to have those the foundation before you're able to even, meeting with a friend on Zoom or, over the phone feels different, I think, when you, first of all, you should put in the effort to do that in general. But like when you're not kind of having those self-care moments, I think we feel that, on a sort of deep level, it brings you down. And on this topic of individual and collective thriving, they're also so connected, I feel like our Columbia, the SMBI program, Spirituality, Mind, Body, that I'm part of, their sort of mission statement is individual inner work for collective outer change. And so it's this whole idea of, we have to start with the individual and the inner piece to really thrive collectively. Like it's so connected. And that definitely resonates with me because it's also like, that's what we can control, we can control to a much larger degree, our sort of internal world and how our relationship with that. We can't really control, how the podcast does, but we can control how we show up to it, that kind of thing. I don't know if that answered the question, but
no, it did. And I want to continue this collective thriving conversation. When I got my Reiki level 1 back in first year, basically one of the first things my Reiki master said to me was like, you're a wounded healer. And she's like, you could do so good. Like you could heal so many people, but internally you haven't dealt with like the emotional, mental traumas that you basically suppressed your entire life thus far. And she's like, in order to actually heal and help other people, first you need to acknowledge, address what you've been through and heal from that. Because she's like, right now, you want to do good. Of course, like that's no denying that. But at the same time, what you're projecting out, like what your frequencies are right now, are wounded. So you kind of like you're projecting out this healing that's really subjective, where you have all these subconscious beliefs already implemented about certain types of trauma. And she's like, you're wanting to go out and help other people, but you haven't helped yourself yet.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can you put the self out, like this facade out, where you're one thing when internally, like you're personally struggling and you have all these like traumas and conditionings, which we all do. And it's okay. And that doesn't need to be healed before you go out and help others as well. Like you could still help others. But at the same time, it's really recognizing what you're projecting out and what elements of yourself have you just kind of ignored and you're unable to acknowledge yet. It's like bringing that inner awareness. And I feel like that's kind of comes first before the inner work. It's just being aware of what's located internally. Like I love using this analogy with my patients or clients. This is what happens when you work like clinically. You call everyone patient. With my clients, where it's like we're born naked, which we quite literally are. And then over time, all these like a conditioning from our parents. Now we're wearing socks. We go to like junior kindergarten. Now we're wearing a shirt. Like over time, all these conditionings and like expectations and like,
I love that metaphor.
Social identities start getting placed on us. Next thing we know, we're wearing like a full snowsuit, like all covered up. And it's everything. It's like, how can we start unraveling some of that? Like that scarf that you're wearing, where did that come from? Like what conditioning is that hat? And just start stripping that away just to find your essence. And I know I always I need to acknowledge my privilege because I'm a white, cisgender, able-bodied woman. So I need to acknowledge that, because obviously I could easily be like, oh, my essence, my soul is this. But I understand that a lot of people, because of race, because of sex, because of gender, because of ability, can't just strip away all of that. Like with them comes so much intergenerational trauma and oppression and racism and sexism and all this. So I always need to acknowledge that. It's like, yes, you are stripping all of this away, but don't forget where you've been socially oppressed. Don't forget that. I know I see a lot of white spiritual leaders just being like, the soul, we're all one. And while I do agree with those notions, at the same time, it's the world is unequal right now.
And that context is so important to include. And, even thinking about sort of a lot of my perspective is, or work is, my goals are to, create this culture of thriving on student campuses, especially, but that diversity, equity, you cannot leave that out, because if we're only talking to, the privileged population, which of course, I'm also a, woman of privilege, immense privilege to be able to do what I'm doing. And my bias is towards that. That's the default lens that I have. And so I think part of also the inner work is actually recognizing that in ourselves. And that awareness, of course, is so integral to sort of being able to do the inner work. Because you're right, if we don't recognize, our lenses that we have, and also recognize sort of how, the layers of clothing, if we don't know we're wearing them, how can we really take them off or decide what to do with them or have a...
I think I completely agree. And sometimes it isn't necessarily I love what you just said, have a relationship with them, because it isn't necessarily having to take everything off. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with having identities. I identify as a woman. I don't know, I feel liberated to say that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That doesn't take away, it's not egotistic to me to identify as a woman. It doesn't take away from my essence or my core. So it's almost like what social, not necessarily even social, but just kind of, conditionings, imprints have been imposed on us through all external influences, and how, first of all, we resonate with those, why we've kept them around for so long. But then at the same time, which do we want to let go? Which do we not resonate with? Which aren't actually part of us? Because like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I do think there are a lot of layers where I love like we keep using this analogy of clothing, but there are layers that I resonate with or I'm not
Mhm.
yet ready to let go of. There's some
Mhm.
layers that keep me close to people, like parents,
Mhm.
for example. Like I don't want to like take everything off right away. So I think
Mhm.
it is acknowledging or knowing and being attuned to your essence, to your core, to your spirit, but at the same time, acknowledging that you're also carrying maybe subconscious beliefs, conscious beliefs, conditionings, imprints, limiting beliefs that may not be yours. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of that. And also, you're reminding me of sort of a key piece of the thriving puzzle for me anyway, is this idea of like control isn't quite the right word, but a sense of like ownership and a sense of control in that I have a choice here. There's a decision I can make or not make. And I think that's a really important piece that you're talking about, you're getting at, is sort of getting off autopilot almost, and like just feeling like we do have that sense of, I know it's here, or if I don't know it's here, I know that I don't know it. Or just a sense of just real ownership and control over um, these aspects of ourselves, or these parts of our lives. There's a real difference between being on autopilot and being in like the driver's seat of our lives. And I think the default, and also again going back to sort of this cultural soup, like it's very easy to get on autopilot, and it's kind of this continual process of like waking up that we need to, or is part of the thriving, I think, really is just constantly waking ourselves up and getting our.
So how do we wake up?
Oh my gosh, such a pointed question.
How do we do it, Sarah? Tell us.
If I knew, girl, if I knew. I mean, I think I really have to go back to just my personal experience here, because that's the only thing I can really. But for me, I think it's definitely a continual process of like checking in with ourselves. I think one of the easiest ways to go on autopilot is technology and social media and our phones, and like, we're living in a time when that is so prevalent, and I don't even think we do not understand the effect.
Going back to first year MIT, literally cyborgs. Like
Yes.
technology has become an extension of us, or we them, to be honest.
Yeah. Like just so that's one aspect. Just like constantly check, am I doing what I want to be doing right? And then also this idea of like, speaking of intuition, sort of getting more in touch with that. And, I really think that we oftentimes know what the right next step is, quote unquote, or a right next step. And waking up is the act of recognizing that, listening to it, and then choosing to act on it. And the biggest example of that I can think of is like when I ignored my intuition to do this route. And I just like three distinct times I can point to. When I was at my old job, I kind of ignored all of the warning signs, and my unconscious being like, girl, this is wrong. You need to make a change. And that got me to like a dark place, ignoring all that. So that's like a big example. But I think there's lots of little ways we can do that. And it gets easier with practice.
And I think that's such a great point. Like your entire self tells you when something's no longer in alignment with your life. And it's okay to let go of people or experiences or jobs that are no longer in alignment with your frequencies now. We are, again, ever evolving. What aligned with you last year may not be the same as what aligns with you this year.
Moment to moment, too. Like,
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know me personally, like when I don't listen to my intuition, the rare time I don't, because I feel like I'm very intuitive, and now I just like I take all the signs, but my physical body starts telling me. I'll start getting back pains, or I'll start getting like nightmares, but like nightmares of the exact situation. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I'm ignoring my intuition. You don't need to tell me like in waking, but also like in my sleep as well. But like you'll get the signs, you'll get the signals. Your intuition will tell you. If you ignore the initial like intuitive moment that you feel, it's going to show up in so many other ways as well.
Yeah. And I really want to qualify this statement, because I think it's important. That's not to say like only ever listen to your intuition. because, that sort of left brain, logical, rational side is there for a reason. It's really, really important. We just live in a time when it is dominant. And so the intuitive, quote unquote, feminine side, that more imaginative side, that side that really knows a lot more, is just generally it's suppressed. So I heard this really great quote from an Indigenous leader during my first week of my master's program, and I have not gotten out of my head. And he basically said, it's the heart's job to tell us what to do. It's the head's job to figure out how to do it. If you kind of are guided by that idea and really have those working together in that way, that's very different, I think, than I know how I've lived, and how my default is to make decisions.
Yeah, this is why it's called the intuition age. It's kind of a play on the information age. Because I do feel like, I know all the sources of information, all the knowledge we need is already within us. We, especially about ourselves, we know everything. We know our truth about who we are, and we're constantly searching, I love school. I love reading. Of course, I'm not saying don't do those things, but we're constantly searching for institutions that will teach us more about ourselves.
Yes.
Hiring people that are going to tell us more about ourselves, when really it's a process of rediscovering who we are and realigning with who we are, because we already know what our truth is. And that's why I love this idea of the intuition age, because it really is a time right now to revert back to our inner knowing, while still, exactly like you said, listen to the intuition and then understand how you could apply it in this projected reality that you're living in.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea to disregard that there's social constructs, institutions, we're our soul chose to be in this reality for a reason. We need to live in it. We can't just completely go live in a cave and disassociate from every aspect of the human experience either.
Yeah, that's a whole other
that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But it's just acknowledging what your inner knowing is telling you, what your higher self is telling you, and then try to understand how you could apply that into your projected reality and into your life.
To this point, I think one of the best things that institutions, and again, I'm coming from an educational institution point of view, but even in the workplace or the family, the home, is to create that space, is one of the things. Create that space for people to really get in touch with themselves and validate that inner knowing. And then also, coming back to the positive psychology field, the tools, help give people the tools so that they can get in touch with that and then really do something with it.
I agree. One of the first things I tell all my clients, it's you're hiring me to fire me, because I'm going to give you those tools and those resources and that space, so important, and that support for you to get to know yourself, get reacquainted with yourself, and then make your own decisions and create your own goals and just curate your own path. And I'm going to be here as a support system, as a safe, sacred space for you to do that. And then when you feel you're attuned to yourself and you're ready to kind of direct your own life without my support, then our coaching relationship is over. But
yes, a masterful coach will coach themselves out of a job. That's definitely is something I go back to. That guides my work. And I had one client describe it as I feel like I've been riding my bike with training wheels during this time that we've had together, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of the training wheels. And then she came in the next session. She was like, "Sarah, I think I'm ready." And I just thought that was such a
you took off those training wheels and just
it's I've learned. Well, she took them off, right? And she said, "I'm ready to do this." And I think that's just such a beautiful metaphor for what is in a way missing, I think, from our, again, education, but even from sort of our predominant spaces. There's not really that space or those tools to learn how to do that.
Okay, so if we don't have someone who could give us those resources and tools for self-discovery and exploration, how can we discover those ourselves?
Great question. So I think one of the first things that we can do, honestly, the first starting place is to have self-compassion, which sounds kind of cheesy and sort of overly simple, but I think it's sort of a key starting place in terms of like just sort of grounding yourself. And then, I mean, one of the other things that, like, you just thinking about, you know, the coaching process even, because really my coaching process is geared towards this idea of thriving. And so I think one of the things we can do is like, that we don't often do, is having just like a vision for ourselves, you know, a goal, not a goal, really a vision. Like, one of my favorite exercises to do with clients is create this like vision statement. And it's this place where we really get into this like dreamy place. And I don't know, I know I didn't give myself a lot of permission to do this when I was,
because like the
younger.
logical, rational mind comes in. It's like, you can't move here. Like, you don't have the resources to do that. Like, you're right. These are unrealistic expectations and visions and intentions for yourself.
Exactly.
But why do we limit ourselves?
Oh, that's a whole other topic. Yeah. I mean, so that's one of the things. Exactly. It's like giving yourself permission to get rid of like the fear, in answer to your last question. Giving yourself permission to get in the space that is like predominantly right-brained, and also just like, you know, say what you want. I feel like that's really powerful in and of itself. Admitting, you know, I want to get into this top master's program, which is one thing for me, or I want to get, you know, I want to have this kind of life, or I want to be, you know, this, I want to have this many hits on YouTube or something like that. I'm just going off of examples I've had with some people. But yeah, giving yourself permission to do that vision work first. And then from there, you know, breaking it down and setting, okay, what are some goals that I could set that'll move me closer to this vision? And then like really, like we, especially as I'm talking about, again, from this emerging adult perspective, we learn so much through experience. But to do that, we really need to give ourselves, again, that permission to fail, or to really, you know, thinking about having a win-learn perspective, to just try something and see what happens. And so that's one of the biggest things I think we can do for ourselves, without sort of someone to guide that process. We can be our own guide for that, and really just give ourselves permission to try something. And one of the best ways I think I've discovered that we can do this is setting goals, but also experiments, sort of, again, reframing that. Like, I'm just going to experiment with this workout routine, or, you know, this 10-minute walk. I don't normally do this, but I'm going to experiment with it and see how it feels. And then there's no pressure on the outcome. Don't like the goal, the task is just to do it and then reflect on it. And it's that combination of that action and reflection that really allows us to learn and make progress and, you know, move towards that thriving vision.
Oh, I have so much to say. I think the first question, though, that I have is, what if, though, one of these, not goals, what did you say? Not intention. Experiments or visions, was it?
Experiment, vision. Both. Either or.
So what if we start experimenting with something that we actually need to invest in? So for example, like I wanted to experiment with coaching, but I also had to invest like $4,000 into a coaching certificate. Or you want to experience with like psychology, but you need to invest in a master's or a certificate or an undergrad even. What, you know, like what if there is an investment aspect? Because it's one thing to be like, I'm going to try out a free workout routine, but like, how about if I invest in a gym now and it's not in alignment with me? What do you do in that regard?
Break it down. You break it down. That's too big. If you don't know if psychology is right for you, go like Google something and see how, maybe that's the experiment. Is I'm just gonna see what this, you know, I'm gonna listen to this podcast, this person talking about their experience, or I'm gonna read this one article. Break it down and work your way up to that. If you don't feel comfortable putting that investment in quite yet, for a variety of means, including means, just make it so small. And that's a really important piece as well, I think, for the thriving aspect, is because in terms of building our confidence in ourselves in this area, like that confidence to make that investment into, you know, I mean, a master's program is a huge investment. Like that's a commitment.
I know that was an extreme example.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. But you know, having these sort of really small mastery experiences is a key part of what Bandura calls self-efficacy, which is basically just our, you know, sense of feeling capable of doing something in a specific context. So I think just break it down, make it so small, and give yourself, like, set yourself up for success is so, so important.
I agree. And start acknowledging the little successes. Is that a word? Successes? Success?
I think so. Yeah,
Little
I think that's
successes, the
well.
little accomplishments as well. Like we were saying, like brushing your teeth or
Yeah.
washing your hair. Like that took effort, that took energy, that took attention. Like, yeah, it's something that you should acknowledge and be happy about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we often look at success as like this grand, like I just got a degree, or I'm making six figures in a job, or I moved to this country. I have whatever, like a beautiful condo in downtown Toronto. Yeah, incredible. Great for you. That's incredible success. But at the same time, little, I'm not even
Mhm.
going to try, not even successes, little
Little
accomplishments.
wins, small
Little
wins. Small
yeah.
wins. Yeah. One of my mentors explained or described achieving as a process, not a sort of milestone or a thing. It's a constant process of achieving. And I think one of the best examples I have of this, and I feel like this will be relevant for a lot of people, is with like the working out and fitness and getting a routine with that. And I remember when I stopped playing competitive soccer when I was 15, I had like 2 years where I just did not do anything. It was awful, so bad. And I really struggled to get back into it
Mm.
because I kept setting, and this at this point it was goals that were way too big, and I would get so discouraged, and I would be, you know, withdrawing from my self-efficacy and making myself feel less confident instead of building my confidence. And I actually had to break it down into one exercise a day, like one movement. And I had like a 30-day calendar, and I was just building movement on top of movements until I got from like, a 30-second workout one day, literally 30 seconds, to, 20 minutes or whatever it was by the end of the month. But like that small, please, I beg you, make it that small if you need to. That's where the progress will come in.
Working out and just fitness in general, that's one, it's such a great example. I have a black belt in Taekwondo, but I stopped doing it
Cool.
competitively like when I was around 15, 16 as well. And getting back to working out and fitness, like you just, I don't know, it just didn't resonate with me anymore. I was like, whatever, like I'm still young. I'll just let my metabolism, because there's so many benefits to working out, physical,
Mhm.
mental, spiritual,
Oh yeah,
emotional, like
your
so many
physical
more
health.
benefits than just like the physical health.
Yeah.
But I didn't resonate with it. And then like my mindset, for example, at that time was like, because to me, I usually correlated like working out and fitness with some sort of like competitive sport or practice. Like I
Mm,
danced too. Like I did a bunch of like
yeah.
softball, all of that. So just trying to go to the gym and work out and try another avenue of fitness, I just it
Yeah.
didn't align with me at the time. Now I absolutely, I love, I love fitness. I love working out. I've been doing it regularly for years now. But it is, first of all, it's like the little steps like we've been discussing, but at the same time, if you're making that transition, especially with fitness, I know me right after Taekwondo, I started looking into like kickboxing and
Mm,
boxing. And
yeah.
that's how I started getting into fitness again. Like I used to do
Yes.
kickboxing when I was doing undergrad. And then that kind of put me into like, okay, let me try out the gym. Like, let me try out
Yeah.
like Soul Cycle, like cycling. Like,
What a
and
great
then it just
example of some
opens,
experiments,
yeah,
right?
it
Yeah.
opens so many avenues for you as well. But you'll
Yes.
never know unless you just make that little like 30-minute, not even 30-second step like you were talking
Whatever
about.
whatever you need to just take one small step. And also, I think another really important piece here is like, okay, that's great. That's getting started. But keeping it going,
Mhm.
right? Um, I think one of the first things to think about here is, um,
Especially if you don't see results right away.
yes, yeah. So two things here. The first one is in terms of like your time frame. It's okay to have a goal, or if you're trying to build a habit, just thinking about 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever time frame is going to work for you, and that's so flexible. So I think we can get really like overwhelmed if we think, oh, this has to be forever, or this, I want to get these habits in now so I can have them for the rest of my life. That's like very hard to hold.
Mhm.
So breaking down the time frame and making that smaller as well, I think is really important because it feels more manageable. And again, we want to build that self-efficacy, that confidence in our abilities. And the second thing is finding something that really intrinsically motivates you is so big. So what values are connected to this, or like just your why, like, why am I doing this? And it just connecting with something that is intrinsically motivating versus extrinsically motivating, such as, I want to get in shape for a wedding or something like that. Like, you'll struggle with that because at that point you're kind of operating on willpower, which is that's a resource that will deplete.
So going back to the fitness example, but also in general as well, how do you get out of that mindset of being stagnant and stuck? Like, for example, when we were transitioning from like competitive sports to, I guess, just like generally working out, how did we, I honestly can't even remember for myself, like, how do you make that mindset shift where it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. This is good for me. This is my why.
Like, so like when you're transitioning from like my why, for example, to use my example, I was on a competitive soccer team, and that was sort of, there's lots of intrinsic benefits and extrinsic benefits for that, but all of a sudden I didn't have that. So what was the thing? Like, how do you make that?
Like, how do you go from that mindset of just being stuck and not knowing what to do next? And this applies in like every aspect of life into like, okay, I'm motivated now. This is my ambition. Like, this is the direction I'm going to take.
I think
mindset shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mean, again, just like really connecting with that why and being honest with yourself about it, like keeping it authentic is really important. Which is a hard thing to do sometimes. But then also I think those mindset shifts can come in like really diverse ways. Like, also thinking about, what need am I meeting by doing this? Or what need is not being met by not doing this? So, to use your example, when you went to sort of kickboxing, I wonder if one of the needs that could have been being met there, one of the mindset shifts could have been, this is for fun. It's not for fitness anymore. It's, I just want to try this out for fun. And that's very, very different perspective than, oh, I'm working out to stay in shape or because I'm part of this team.
So it was definitely a release for me. I know personally, it's like I had all this like emotional tension and like lots of stress from university. And each time I kicked something or punched something, I was like, what an emotional release.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My mom does kickboxing and she loves it. She absolutely loves it. She just got into it right before the pandemic hit. And so I can only imagine the release there. But yeah, just like, I mean, I think those perspective shifts can come in such a variety of ways. So asking yourself about your needs and maybe shifting there, or your why, shifting there. Also using the experiment technique, I think, is really good to sort of encourage yourself to take action, because it takes so much pressure off. Like, it's so hard to do things that we're not used to doing or don't want to do when it feels like it's a weight on us.
So I want to ask a personal question to end off this amazing episode. What are you personally doing right now in a time of lockdown and pandemic here in the GTA to stay motivated and ambitious and also thrive and just maintain overall optimal well-being in all aspects of your life?
I am someone who really likes sort of the New Year time, because I am someone who likes to set intentions and goals and all of that. And one of my big intentions for this year, to go back to something we talked about earlier, was this idea of awake, waking up. And I think for me, one of the biggest things, and I'm fortunate because I am in school and it feels like I have sort of a built-in progress report or way to like structure to keep making progress. But one of the things that I'm doing is challenging myself to stay awake, but also to do the thing to do the thing that scares me. Which for me personally right now is honestly talking to people, like building sort of a network and relationships in this new industry that I'm in. And that's a huge thing that I've struggled with. And so, I kind of bit off. It's one thing. It's really just one thing, but it's the hardest thing for me. So that's, I think, the thing that I'm doing this year to keep myself motivated and ambitious, I guess.
That's a big one.
Pandemic time. It is. And I say that with a grain of salt because it's not going to be right for everyone, but it felt right for me this year.
And also connecting with others during a time where like we cannot connect in person. I'm someone who communicates way better when I'm face to face with someone. So just trying to communicate through like technology too, I don't feel fully myself, like I'm fully embodying myself. So
Mm,
amazing that that's
yeah.
one of your major intentions for this year.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nicole. I've had such a great time talking with you.
Oh,
And
thanks for
I
being
know we
here,
kind of went
Sarah, all over
kind
the
of a
place.
lot, yeah, but I really appreciate your questions and your interest in sharing your experiences. I learned so much from this conversation.
Oh, thanks for being here, Sarah. You're welcome back anytime.
I love that. Well, I'm excited to, I mean, yeah, we know we've talked about this. I've listened to a number of your episodes, but not everything. So I have a kind of a stash to get to.
Yay, I love that. Yeah, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
If you feel enlightened and inspired by the intuition age, I would be eternally grateful if you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. This platform truly allows me to act as a catalyst for expanding and elevating human consciousness, both individually and collectively. All shares, downloads, and subscribes help me distribute these divine topics to even more conscious souls. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next episode.